On my 50th wedding anniversary, my daughter leaned in close to her husband on my own front porch and whispered, "I'll keep him at the restaurant until 10. You take Dad's notary stamp from the upstairs safe and meet Ms. Albright at the courthouse. She'll backdate the deed." She thought I was inside hunting from my reading glasses. She thought a man 2 months past his 68th birthday, a man who had buried his wife only 8 months ago, was too gutted by grief to hear a whisper through an open screen door. She was wrong about a lot of things that night. My name is Bennett Locke. I spent 41 years as a marine engineer down in Tampa, putting working boats back to sea after hurricanes and salvaging things that other men gave up on. I retired the spring before Eloise had her stroke. We were supposed to take the trawler down to Marathon for a season. We were supposed to do a lot of things. The house she and I built together sits on 3 acres of waterfront on the south end of Old Tampa Bay. I poured the foundation myself in 1984 with my own 2 hands and a borrowed cement mixer. Eloise painted the porch ceiling that pale haint blue you see on the old Charleston houses because she said it kept the wasps away and welcomed the dead. After she passed last February, I sat on that porch every evening watching the herons and trying to talk myself into believing she was sitting next to me. That's the man my daughter and her husband thought they were dealing with. A drowning widower, a breathing checkbook with a fogged-up mind. It was a Saturday in October. 50 years to the day since Eloise walked down the aisle of St. Bartholomew's in a borrowed dress because her mother's old wedding gown had been eaten through by silverfish in the attic. She used to tell that story at every anniversary dinner. Every single one. My daughter Jacqueline called me 3 weeks before the date. She's 39 now, a top producer at a luxury real estate firm in St. Pete, and she has her mother's eyes but absolutely none of her warmth. "Dad," she said in that careful, syrupy voice she'd been using since the funeral, "Reed and I want to take you out for the anniversary. Just the 3 of us, somewhere nice." Reed is her husband. 41. Sharp suits, a smile that always seemed rented. I told her I'd rather stay home and grill a snapper the way Eloise liked it, with brown butter and capers. I told her I'd open a bottle of the Prosecco we'd been saving. "Daddy," she said, and I knew right then something was wrong because she only called me Daddy when she wanted something. "Please don't sit alone in that big house on your anniversary. Mom wouldn't want that. We made a reservation at Burns." Reed pulled some strings. Reed pulled some strings. Reed was always pulling strings he hadn't earned the right to pull. I said yes because I was tired and because telling her no had become exhausting in a way I couldn't name. Grief makes you nod when you ought to refuse. They came over at 6. Jacqueline wore a dress the color of dry champagne and a string of pearls I knew she'd inherited from her mother's jewelry box without asking. Reed had on a blazer that probably cost what my first car did, and he kept checking his watch the way a man does when he's already late for somewhere he shouldn't be going. "Pop," he said, clapping my shoulder. "You look sharp." Eloise would be proud. I hate it when people say what the dead would feel. They don't know. They never know. I went upstairs to grab the silver cufflinks Elwas gave me on our 25th, the ones shaped like little anchors. As I was pulling them out of the drawer, I heard Reed's phone buzz in the foyer below me, and then I heard him sigh, that big theatrical sigh he saves for an audience. Aw, hell, it's the Sarasota deal. I have to take this. Raid, no, not tonight. Babe, 2 minutes. I'll meet you at the restaurant. Take your father in your car. I'll be 20 minutes behind. I came halfway down the stairs and stopped on the landing where the wall hides you from the porch. The screen door was open. The breeze off the bay was carrying their voices straight up to me like a radio I'd forgotten to turn off. "I'll keep him at the restaurant until 10, my daughter whispered. "You take Dad's notary stamp from the upstairs safe and meet Ms. Albright at the courthouse. She'll backdate the deed." I stopped breathing. The cufflinks were sharp in my palm where I'd squeezed them. Miss Ed. Albright was the title company woman my old realtor friend had warned me about 2 years ago. Said she'd helped 2 different developers slide some shady transfers past widows down in Pinellas County. The notary stamp in the upstairs safe, that wasn't mine. It was Eloise's. She'd been a notary for the credit union for 26 years, and they let her keep her seal when she retired. My daughter must have known about it because she'd been the one who packed up her mother's office things from the spare room. She'd known where that stamp was, sitting the whole time. She'd been waiting for tonight. I wanted to throw the door open and ask her what in God's name she thought she was doing. I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and shake her until the woman I raised fell back out of her. But 41 years of dealing with crooked contractors and lying insurance adjusters had taught me one thing. You don't show what you know. Not until you know all of it. I went into the bathroom. I ran the cold tap and put my wrists under it. I looked at the man in the mirror and I told him, very quietly, "You play dumb. You play dumb all the way to the bottom of the well." When I came back down, I had a tremor in my hand I didn't have to fake. Reed was already heading for his BMW. "Everything okay, son?" I asked. "Just work, Pop. I'll see you at Burns." He flashed me the rented smile and got in his car, and I watched him pull out of the driveway and turn the wrong way for downtown. He was driving toward the courthouse. Jacqueline took my elbow. Her grip was harder than it needed to be. "Ready, Daddy? We've got the corner booth." The drive into Tampa took 25 minutes. She talked the whole way. About the new place she and Reed had bought on Davis Islands. About the markets being weird. About a charity event for the symphony she was chairing in November. She talked about everything except her mother. She talked the way a person talks when silence might cost them. I sat in the passenger seat of her white SUV and I let her chatter wash over me, and I thought about the man I used to be. About what that man would do. When we sat down at Burns, she ordered a Bordeaux that cost more than my first paycheck out of the Navy. She kept her phone face down on the table, but I watched her thumb twitch toward it every 90 seconds. I asked her about Eloise's notary stamp. Just like that, right in the middle of the bread service. Her face did a small thing. A flicker. What? The stamp. From the credit union. I was looking for it the other day. I thought maybe you packed it up with the other things from her office. Daddy, why would you need that? I don't. I was just thinking about her, looking for things. She softened, and she squeezed my hand across the white tablecloth. Dad, oh Dad, we've got to stop you spiraling like this. Mom's been gone for almost a year. You can't keep going through her things every night. I let my eyes water up. It wasn't hard. The waiter brought the wine and she pretended to taste it, and the candle on the table threw a little gold light onto her cheek, and for half a second I saw my little girl, the one who used to ride on the deck of the trawler in a tiny orange life vest. And my chest did something so painful I almost forgot what she had done. Almost. Her phone buzzed face down on the table. She flipped it over so fast she almost knocked her water glass. Her face went the color of skim milk. "Oh," she breathed. "I have to take this. It's the office. There's a closing tomorrow, and—" She was already on her feet, already moving toward the alcove by the wine cellar with the phone pressed against her cheek so hard it must have hurt. I sat there for 30 seconds. I sipped the Bordeaux. It tasted like ash. Then I got up, walked past the maitre d' with my best old man shuffle, and slipped into the hallway near the wine cellar. I stopped behind a tall display case full of vintage cognacs. She was hissing into the phone. "What do you mean it's locked?" "Reed, you said you knew the combination. You said your dad showed you in August." A pause. "I don't care, just—" "No, you cannot drill the safe. Are you out of your mind? He'll hear it from the neighbors. Did you check the second number? The one I told you might be the day they got married." A longer pause. Her voice climbed. "Then try her birthday. Try mine. Try anything." Another pause. Then her voice dropped to something I'd never heard from her before, something cold and reptilian. Reed. Reed, you listen to me. Ms. Albright is sitting in her car outside the courthouse and that window closes in 45 minutes. If we don't get that stamp on those papers tonight, the whole deal goes back 6 months and your friends are going to come asking questions you don't want to answer. So you get into that safe. Her friends. Reed's friends. I filed that away. I went back to the booth before she did. When she came back, her color was wrong, but she put the smile on like a coat. Everything okay, sweetheart? Just a difficult client. Honestly, Dad, the things people expect from you these days. We ate our dinner. She got me to tell stories about her mother. Every time I told one, I watched her glance at her phone. I told the one about how Eloise saved a half-drowned pelican during the '93 storm. I told the one about how she taught Sunday school for 30 years and once made a 5-year-old cry by being too honest about Noah. I let my voice break in the right places. I let Jacqueline think she was watching the dam crumble. At 9:15, her phone lit up again. She read it under the table and her shoulders dropped 2 inches. The relief on her face was almost obscene. Reed's almost here, she said. I knew exactly what that text said. It said he'd gotten in. But Reed never came through the door of that restaurant. 20 minutes later, 2 uniformed Tampa police officers came in instead. The hostess pointed them to our booth. The taller one took his hat off. Ma'am, sir, are you Bennett Locke? I am. Sir, we received a silent alarm from your residence at 2814 Bayshore. A neighbor across the street also reported seeing an unfamiliar man exit your front door carrying a briefcase. The man was apprehended on Bayshore Boulevard. He's currently in our cruiser. He's identifying himself as your son-in-law. We'd appreciate it if you could come with us to confirm. I looked at Jacqueline. The color had not just left her face, it had fled. Her mouth was open. Her hand was shaking around the stem of her wineglass. Officer, I said, slow, I'm not sure I understand. Why would there be an alarm? Sir, the alarm system on your property reported a forced entry into a residential safe. The safe was opened. The system is set up to alert the local precinct directly. It's a security feature. Whoever was in there triggered it. I had never told my daughter or my son-in-law that 2 years ago when Eloise first started getting forgetful and I worried about her wandering, I'd installed a high-end residential system that included a contact sensor inside the master bedroom safe. The kind of sensor that if the safe is opened without the correct disarm code being entered first into the wall panel, sends a silent alarm to the police along with a covert audio recording. Reed hadn't known about the audio. I let my hand shake on the table. I let my voice get thin. Oh dear Lord, was anyone hurt? No, sir. But we need you to come with us, please. I made a show of standing up slow. I made a show of needing to grip the edge of the booth. Jacqueline reached for her purse with hands that were trembling so badly she dropped her keys twice. In the squad car on the way back to Bayshore, my daughter sat next to me in the back seat and she would not look at me. She was praying. I could see her lips moving. She wasn't praying for me. She was praying for Reed. When we pulled up to the house, the whole street was lit up red and blue. My neighbors were on their lawns in their bathrobes. Mrs. Pemberton from across the street, the one who'd called it in, was standing at the end of her driveway with her arms folded and that grim, satisfied set to her mouth she gets when she's been proven right about something. Reed was in the back of another cruiser, hands behind his back, sweating through his expensive blazer. When he saw me coming up the driveway, he started shouting through the window, "Pop! Pop! Tell them! Tell them! It's a misunderstanding. I came to get your medication. You texted me. You asked me to come get your medication." A misunderstanding. The misunderstanding industrial complex. The officer in charge, a thick-necked sergeant named Wexler, walked me through it. The suspect had been carrying a briefcase containing a notary embosser, 3 unsigned warranty deed forms, and a check made out for the sum of $1, listing the transfer of 2.8 acres of waterfront property from Bennett Locke to an entity called Meridian Coastal Holdings, LLC. $1. They were going to transfer my land to a shell company for $1. I'd never heard of Meridian Coastal Holdings in my life. Sergeant Wexler looked me dead in the eye. Sir, your son-in-law is claiming you authorized this transfer. He has a document with him purporting to be a durable power of attorney signed by you in February of this year. It gives him full authority over your real estate and financial affairs. Sir, do you recognize this document? He held up a clear evidence bag. I recognized the document instantly. I recognized it because I had signed something that looked exactly like it 8 months ago in a hospital corridor at Tampa General, with my wife 3 doors down on a ventilator and a brain that had stopped knowing me. Reed had walked in with a folder and said very softly, "Pop, you need to sign this medical power of attorney so they can authorize the treatments if you can't be reached. Just procedural." I had signed it without my glasses on, with tears in my eyes, with a hand that wasn't taking instructions from my brain. I looked at Wexler. I let my eyes go vague. "Officer," I said, "I don't recall. I've signed so many papers since my wife. I just can't recall." Beside me, Jacqueline made a small wounded sound. She was holding her breath. She thought if I said the wrong thing now, Reed was going to prison tonight. He should have been going to prison tonight. But 41 years of marine engineering had also taught me that you don't tow a wreck off the reef in one yank. You set the cables. You take the slack. You wait for the tide. I said, "Sergeant, this is my son-in-law. There's been some kind of mix-up. I don't want to press charges tonight. Let me sit down with him in the morning. Let me get my head clear." Wexler stared at me a long beat. He'd seen this before. He knew. He gave me the smallest nod a man can give. "Sir, we'll release him to your custody tonight. But this report is going to stay open. I want you to call my desk first thing Monday morning. Here's my card." I took the card. I put it in my breast pocket next to Eloise's anchor cufflinks. Reed threw himself out of the cruiser the moment they uncuffed him. He grabbed my hand with both of his and pumped it like a man at a tent revival. "Pop, Pop, thank you, we're going to get this sorted out. Honest to God, I was just trying to help with the paperwork while you've been so down." I looked at him. I looked at my daughter behind him, her eyes wide and wet and pleading. "Go home," I said. "Both of you. Go home and let me sleep." They went. Reed was talking the whole way down the driveway, telling Jacqueline about how it was all going to be fine, telling her his lawyer would have it cleared by Tuesday. She wasn't answering him. She was watching me in the side mirror of her SUV. I waved at her. A small, sad, grandfatherly wave. I waited until their taillights turned the corner. Then I went inside, walked past the rifled safe in the bedroom, and packed a duffel bag. I drove straight to Mickey Devlin's house in Largo. Mickey and I served on the same destroyer escort out of Mayport in 1976. He came up in the engine room with me. After he got out, he went into accounting, of all damn things. And over 30 years, he turned himself into one of the best forensic accountants on the Gulf Coast. He retired 3 years ago. He has bad hips and a perfect memory in a basement office with 3 monitors and a coffee pot that runs 24 hours. I knocked on his door at 11:15 at night. He opened it in a Buccaneers t-shirt and reading glasses, and he looked at my face and didn't say a word. Just stepped back and let me in. I told him everything in his kitchen over a mug of bad decaf. He let me finish. Then he said, "Show me the POA." I had a photograph of the evidence bag. I'd snapped it on my phone over Wexler's shoulder. He took my phone, zoomed in on the document, and his jaw set. "Bennett, this isn't a medical POA. This is a full, durable financial. Page 2 grants him authority over banking, real estate, retirement accounts, and trust assets. Page 3 has a springing clause that activates the second a doctor signs off that you're cognitively impaired." I never signed that. You signed something. Question is, what was on top of it when you signed? We were up until 4 in the morning. By dawn, Mickey had pulled the Florida Sunbiz records on Meridian Coastal Holdings. The LLC had been registered in March, 2 months after my wife's funeral. The listed manager was a Delaware holding company. The Delaware holding company had a registered agent in Wilmington who'd signed for 6 other shell entities in the past year, all of which were quietly assembling a list of waterfront parcels along a 1-mile stretch of Old Tampa Bay south of the Gandy Bridge. My 3 acres were the center of that stretch. "Bennett," Mickey said, rubbing his eyes, "I know that stretch. I know what's coming for that stretch." The Port of Tampa announced a feasibility study 6 months ago for a new container terminal expansion to handle the post-Panamax ships. The current site is bottlenecked. The leading alternative on the public planning maps is a strip running from Gandy down to your old marina. He looked at me. "You know a waterfront with deep channel access on that strip is worth in a federal port expansion buyout? Tell me. You're sitting on at least $22 million of land, Bennett. And whoever assembles the contiguous parcels before the announcement is going to clear maybe 4 times that on the resale to the Port Authority. $22 million. For the 3 acres where I taught my daughter to ride a bicycle. For the dock where Eloise and I drank coffee every Sunday morning of our entire marriage." Mickey kept going. He pulled my bank records. I'd given him my passwords years ago in case anything ever happened to me, and he started cross-referencing them against transfers Reed would have had access to under the fraudulent POA. By 7 in the morning, he had it. Over the past 6 months, $1.6 million had been moved out of the brokerage account Eloise and I had built up over 41 years. Moved in pieces. 60,000 here, 140 there, all routed through a corporate account at a small bank in the Panhandle, then washed into Meridian Coastal Holdings as capital contributions. Reed had been using my own money to buy up my neighbor's parcels. I sat at Mickey's kitchen table while the sun came up over his lemon tree, and I felt something inside me that I hadn't felt since the morning Eloise's monitor went flat. It wasn't grief. Grief is hot. This was cold. This was the cold you feel in the chain locker of a ship in February, the cold that wakes a man up. "Mickey," I said, "I need a lawyer who doesn't sleep." He called Imogen Ridgway at 7:40 on a Sunday morning. She was at his kitchen table by 10. She's 61 years old, 5'2", white hair cut close to her skull, and her last 3 opposing counsels each ended their careers shortly after meeting her. Mickey introduced her to me by saying, "Bennett, this is the woman who broke the Pinellas Trust scandal." She just took the manila folder out of my hand and started reading. When she was done, she set the folder down, and she said, "Mr. Locke, I would like to ruin your son-in-law. Are you in agreement with that goal?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Now, your daughter. What do you want?" I looked out Mickey's kitchen window. I thought of Jacqueline as a 4-year-old, sitting on the dock in her little orange life vest, asking me if fish had grandmas. "I want her to know what she did," I said. "I want her to know all the way down to her bones. After that, what she does with that knowledge is her business." Imogen nodded once. She opened a leather portfolio and began writing. The plan took 5 days to build. 5 days during which I returned home, walked around in my old clothes, did my grocery shopping, called Jacqueline twice a day, told her I was tired and confused and needed time to think, and let her believe she was watching the slow capsizing of her father's mind. On the 3rd day, I called her and I asked her to come over. I told her I'd been thinking about the house. I told her it was too big for me. I told her mother wouldn't want me dying alone in this place. I told her, and I made my voice break, that maybe she and Reed were right. Maybe it was time to think about transferring things to the next generation. To get the affairs in order. To make it simple. The pause on the line was so long I thought the call had dropped. "Daddy," she said, and her voice was thick with what she wanted me to believe was emotion. "Daddy, that's the most loving thing you could do. Mom would be so proud. Reed and I, we'll take care of everything. We have a lawyer. We can have the documents ready by Friday." A lawyer? Of course they did. "Friday," I said. "Friday's good. I just want it done. I just want to rest." After she hung up, I went out onto the porch and I looked at the haint blue ceiling Eloise had painted with her own hands, and I said out loud, "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm sorry for raising what I raised." Then I called Imogen. Friday morning, 10 o'clock. I drove myself to a 42nd floor conference room in a glass tower downtown. The firm name on the door was theirs, not mine. Reed had insisted on his lawyer, a slick man named Drysdale whose suit was Italian and whose conscience was untroubled. Jacqueline and Reed were already seated at a long mahogany table when I walked in. Coffee in front of them. A stack of documents in a blue folio in front of Reed. Their lawyer at the head of the table. I had on the same flannel I'd worn to mow the grass on Wednesday. I had stubble. I had let my hair go uncombed. I shuffled. Jacqueline stood up and hugged me with that careful, dry hug. Reed pumped my hand. Both of them were vibrating with the kind of cheerfulness that's only ever covering nausea. "Have a seat, Pop. We've made it real simple." I sat down. Drysdale slid the blue folio across the table. I opened it. The top sheet was not a deed transfer. The top sheet was a federal civil complaint, filed at 6 o'clock that morning in the Middle District of Florida, naming Reed as defendant in 7 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of bank fraud, 1 count of conspiracy to commit honest services fraud, and 1 count of exploitation of a vulnerable adult. The second sheet was a Florida bar complaint against Drysdale himself for his role in preparing fraudulent conveyance documents. The third sheet was a notice of TRO, freezing all assets of Meridian Coastal Holdings, granted at midnight last night by a federal judge who had once served with me on a flood control commission. The fourth sheet was a single-page summary of the $1.6 million that had been transferred out of my brokerage account, with the receiving accounts highlighted in yellow. Reed's face changed in stages. First confusion. Then the dawning. Then the white panic of a man who has just understood that the floor under him is not a floor. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. I looked at Jacqueline. She had not yet looked at the documents. She was watching her husband. "Reed," she said. Her voice was very small. "Reed, what is he talking about?" Reed was making a noise in his throat that wasn't language. Drysdale was already on his feet, mouth open, looking for the exit. I said very quietly, "Sit down, counselor. You're going to want to hear this." Drysdale sat. I turned the fourth sheet around so Jacqueline could see it. "Sweetheart," I said, and I used the word on purpose because I wanted her to hear it the way she used to hear it when she was small. "This is a record of $1.6 million your mother and I saved across 41 years. This is the cruise to Norway. This is the new transmission we never put in the trawler because we said we'd do it next spring. This is the trust we set up for the grandchildren you said you and Reed weren't ready for yet. Your husband moved it, in pieces, into a shell company that has been buying up the lots around our house, including the Hendrickson place, including the Mendrickson's place, including Mrs. Pemberton's sister's lot, including the marina." Jacqueline's eyes moved across the page. Her lips moved silently. "He told you it was a real estate play," I said. "He told you he was building something. He told you he just needed a little time and your father's signature and a notary stamp and you'd both be set for life. He told you that, didn't he?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. "He didn't tell you about the cruise to Norway, did he? He didn't tell you the money he was building it with was the money your mother saved by clipping coupons for 41 years. Her eyes filled. They didn't spill. They just filled. I turned the page again. The next sheet was a printed transcript. The covert audio recording from the safe sensor on the night of my anniversary. Reed's voice on the phone, hissing at someone I now knew was a man named Cyrus down in Sarasota, who'd been laundering money for him for the past 9 months. The transcript ran 4 pages. Page 2, line 18 was the line that did it. "REID. She'll sign whatever we tell her to sign. Jacqueline does what I tell her. She thinks her old man is broken. She doesn't know there's anything underneath the house transfer. She thinks we're just helping her dad downsize. Once we have title, I move the asset into Meridian and she finds out the rest from the news." Jacqueline read it twice. Then she read it a third time. Then she stood up so fast her chair fell backward and hit the floor. "You son of a bitch," she said. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at her husband. You were going to cut me out. You were going to cut me out of my own father's house." Reed was shaking his head. Baby, no, that's taken out of context. I was talking to Cyrus. I had to say things to him to keep him calm. I was always going to. You took my mother's money. I was investing it. Baby, listen. I was investing it. I was going to put it all back. I just needed leverage. The port deal is real. The port deal is real. $22 million is real. You took my mother's money. It was not a sentence. It was a sound that came out of her chest. She walked around the conference table. She walked very slowly, the way a person walks who isn't sure their legs are theirs. She stopped in front of Reed. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she slapped him so hard her pearls jumped. Drysdale stood up again. "Mr. Merle, Locke, in light of these developments, I think it would be appropriate to sit down," said Imogen, who had been standing silently by the window the entire time. She stepped forward. "Mr. Drysdale, I'd advise you to find new counsel of your own. I'll be at the bar by Monday morning." Reed was on his knees now. He had slid out of his chair the way a man slides out of an overturned car. He was reaching for me across the carpet. Pop, listen. The port deal is real. The numbers are real. 22 million, Pop. Maybe more. I just need you to hold off on the complaint. Give me 90 days, and I can have the parcels resold. I can pay back every cent. I can pay you back triple. Please, you're a reasonable man, please. I looked down at him. The thing I'd thought of as my son-in-law for 7 years was on the floor of a conference room in his Italian suit, weeping. And he was offering to pay me back with money he was going to make selling my own neighborhood out from under my own feet. "Get up," I said. "You don't get to weep on my carpet. This isn't your carpet." I turned to Jacqueline. She was standing in the middle of the room with one hand over her mouth and the other hand on the back of her chair, and she looked, for the first time in years, like she didn't know what to do. "Honey," I said. She looked at me. "I'm not going to send you with him," I said. "What you do tonight is up to you. But the house your mother painted that porch on isn't going to a shell company, and the money she saved isn't going to Sarasota, and the man you're standing next to is going to spend a long time answering for what he did." She didn't answer me. She walked over and she sat down in a chair against the wall and she stared at her hands. Her pearls were still trembling against her collarbone. It was over in 12 minutes. Imogen walked the two of them through their options. Reed signed every cooperation agreement she put in front of him in exchange for the federal complaint being narrowed from 12 counts to 4. Jacqueline was never charged. The audio transcript made it clear she'd been deceived as thoroughly as I had, just in a different shape. Meridian Coastal Holdings was dissolved. The parcels Reed had acquired with my money were returned to their original owners with apologies and quitclaim deeds. The Hendricksons cried on the phone when I called them. Mrs. Pemberton's sister sent a tin of pecans. Reed took a plea. He's serving 7 years in a federal facility outside Pensacola. Jacqueline filed for divorce 16 days after the conference room. She called me from her car in the parking lot of her lawyer's office. She didn't ask to come home. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She just said, "Daddy, I didn't know. I didn't know about the money. I want you to know I didn't know. I want you to know I didn't know." I said, "I know you didn't, sweetheart. That's not the part you have to live with. The part you have to live with is what you did know." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Yes, sir." That was 9 months ago. We talk on Sundays now. It's small. It's careful. She lives in a 1-bedroom in Riverview, and she sold her pearls and she's working as a leasing agent at a complex out by the airport. She hasn't asked me for money. I haven't offered any. There's something in that, on both sides, that I think her mother would respect. The Board of Tampa announced the container expansion in March. The plan ran north of my property. The numbers were never 22 million. Mickey thinks Reed was lying about that number. or the federal lobbyists were lying to him. Either way, my 3 acres are worth what they always were. About 2.6 on a good Tuesday. And they were never going to make anyone rich. I called the Port Authority and the Hillsborough County Land Trust. I deeded one of the 3 acres, the South Acre, the one with the live oak where Eloise used to read her romance novels in a folding chair, into a perpetual conservation easement. The deed names it the Eloise Lock Coastal Preserve. It can never be developed. Not by me, not by my daughter, not by anyone who comes after. Pelicans and herons get it. Children of fishermen get to walk it. That's the deal. The other 2 acres I kept. The house I kept. The dock I kept. The haint blue porch ceiling I kept. Mickey comes over on Wednesdays. We grill snapper. We talk about old shipmates who are gone. He calls me a stubborn son of a bitch and I call him worse, and we mean it as love. Sometimes on Sunday evenings I sit on that porch and I watch the water turn the color of a bruise and then the color of a peach, and I tell my wife about my week. I tell her about the daughter we still have, and what's left of her, and what might be saved. I tell her about the pelicans. I tell her about the people who tried to take what we built and what they got for trying. I tell her I held the line. If you've been listening this far, and if you've ever been the one and the family people thought was too tired or too sad or too old to notice, if you've ever sat at a dinner table and felt the people you raised whispering on the other side of a screen door, I want you to hear this. They are counting on your grief. They are counting on you nodding. The first thing they will steal from you is your own confidence in what you heard. Believe what you heard, and then call your lawyer the same night. Not Monday. That night. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs it. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and tell me about the moment you decided to stop being underestimated. I read everyone. I have one more story for you next week. A widow in Charleston, a grandson with a notary, a safe deposit box that wasn't supposed to have a witness inside it. Until then, hold the line.